What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in CoD World War II. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the Lewis light machine gun, and this is a gun that I have to say at the beginning here, I feel is extremely underrated. If you haven't given this gun an honest go yet, make sure you do so, but let's hop into the gun guide for this. First up, as always, let's cover some of the in real life stats. So the Lewis gun was actually created with collaboration from the USA as well as the United Kingdom, and therefore it was actually chambered primarily in two different calibers, 30-06 for the Americans and 303 British for the UK. This gun was actually developed primarily for World War I. This was put into service in 1914, and it was generally replaced by a lot of other light machine guns in World War II, specifically the Bren, which we will be covering in a future gun guide, but it was still used in World War II as well. As for the Lewis gun in CoD World War II, we get a damage profile of 40-30. This means it's always going to be a 3 to 4 shot kill. However, the range where this drops off to the 4-shot kill is such a long distance that I'm pretty sure there isn't a single line of sight in this game that's that long. So realistically speaking, this gun will always be a 3-shot kill if you're not shooting through cover. Our rate of fire with the Lewis is actually somewhat realistic for once at 517 rounds per minute, and interestingly enough, this is exactly the same as the FG42 rifle. As for rapid fire, that bumps it up to 550 rounds per minute. Our statistical minimum time to kill is going to be 232 milliseconds within the 3-shot kill range, which, like I said earlier, is going to be all of your kills. This is a very respectable time to kill in this game. It's obviously beat out at some of the really close ranges by SMGs and some of the rifles, but generally, especially when you consider those longer range shots where it's still going to be a 3-shot kill with this weapon, this is an incredible time to kill at those longer ranges. Moving on to our headshot damage, we get a standard multiplier of 1.1, which means it takes our damage profile to a 44-33, and this means headshots aren't going to reduce the number of shots it takes to kill with the Lewis, even if every one of the shots hits him in the head. Moving on to our ranges, it's pretty straightforward and pretty much impossible to actually show you the real ranges of this. As you can see on my range chart, the 3-shot kill range extends well beyond my range chart that I can make here. If you're interested in the actual number, it drops off to a 4-shot kill at 100 meters. This is well beyond any line of sight that I'm aware of in this game. Even Operation Neptune, when you're defending the beaches, I'm pretty sure there's no ranges that extend beyond 100 meters. I could be a little bit off on that, but either way, that should just give you an indication that this gun is always going to be a 3-shot kill. As for hardcore modes, once again, really straightforward. It's always going to be a 1-shot kill, no matter what, with the Lewis. Moving on to idle sway, the Lewis has almost no idle sway. It's got a very, very minor amount of idle sway, but even at extremely long ranges, this generally isn't going to affect your accuracy at all. As for recoil, the Lewis is actually incredible in the recoil department. It kicks completely straight vertically, and then the odd shot every now and then will bounce left or right, just slightly. But for the most part, you can see I just draw a straight line straight vertically, and this means it's extremely easy to control, and you can be very, very accurate with this weapon. As for our hipfire spread, it's pretty much standard for LMGs, which isn't really that great when you compare it to the rifles and SMGs, but you can see it kind of falls right in the middle there with the MG42, slightly worse than the MG15, but definitely better than the Bren. Moving on to magazine capacity, it's got an excellent standard magazine of 47 rounds with 94 in reserve, and this is especially great due to the fact that this has a relatively low rate of fire, so you don't really burn through these 47 rounds very quickly at all. Having said this, popping extended mags on there is huge for this weapon. This bumps it all the way up to 97 rounds. This is a massive magazine capacity for a weapon of this fire rate, and I actually really enjoy using extended mags because it basically means I just never have to reload. I can go a whole life, I can kill like a dozen enemies without ever having to reload this weapon. And this is important to note because the reload speed with the Lewis is quite slow at 5.19 seconds. This is relatively standard for LMGs, but extremely slow compared to everything else in the game. So you definitely don't want to be caught reloading this weapon too often. It'll take you out of the fight for a considerable amount of time, and therefore I love using extended mags, Hustle, or the Armor Division. While deploying your bipod, you will reload this considerably faster if you do that. As for our handling and mobility stats, this is where it really falls down, and this is what really keeps it balanced with the FG42, for instance, because so far, it's beating the FG42 in almost every single category. So our aim down sight time is quite slow at 350 milliseconds. Quick draw is pretty much a must-have on all of the LMGs, I would say. Our sprint out time is also painfully slow with this gun at 350 milliseconds. Basically what this means is if you run into somebody that's pre-aiming you and you're sprinting, you literally won't be able to fire a shot before you're dead. Even if you pull the trigger immediately, A bullet won't come out of your gun before you're dead. It's extremely slow. As for our movement speed, it's standard for LMGs and relatively slow at 90%, and when we're aiming down sight, it slows all the way down to 40%, and the key with LMGs as well is you slow down very considerably as you're strafing and shooting. It's kind of like Black Ops 3's system, where you can strafe at a somewhat decent speed when you're aiming down sight, but the moment you start shooting the gun as you're strafing, it pretty much stops you dead in your tracks. You will strafe extremely slowly as you're actually firing the weapon. So overall, it's very clear that this is an LMG, it's quite slow, it's going to be very difficult to be aggressive with this gun, but as a defensive weapon, this thing is incredible. This is one of my favorite LMGs to use in the game. Like I said at the beginning, I feel it's an extremely underrated gun as well. I love using it on defense in the war mode when I don't really have to be aggressive. I don't have to push up to people and get caught sprinting. I can just kind of lock down an area and just melt everything in my path, especially through walls when I'm using FMJ. So getting into my preferred attachments, of course, quick draw. It's an LMG, it already aims down sight extremely slow, so having that quick draw on there will make it a little bit less painful to be aiming down sight. FMJ is amazing for this. Like I was saying, you can spray through cover like crazy, and in this game, it's really easy to do that. So if you see somebody run behind cover, odds are there's a pretty decent chance you can just shoot through the cover and get the kill. I've got more penetration kills with this gun compared to any gun in the game. Also, extended mags. Like I said earlier, I don't like reloading this gun too often, and I also don't like using hustle very much with this weapon either. It's absolutely not necessary to put extended mags on this, but I like the fact that when I do have it on there, generally I never need to reload this gun. I can go on like a 10 kill streak as long as I'm not spraying like crazy and trying to put down suppressing fire. I can comfortably go on long streaks with this without ever having to reload, and most of the time I'm going to be dying before I completely run out of ammo anyways, and therefore I just respawn fully reloaded and ready to go again. Finally, I also really like using a reflex sight on this. Now, I have gotten used to using the iron sights a lot lately, and I don't find the iron sights to be bad by any means, but I definitely found since I was challenging people at slightly longer ranges, that reflex sight did help quite a bit, so I'd recommend trying it with as well as without and see what you like better with this. But it is one of the few guns in the game where I definitely like using the reflex sight. So getting into a couple example classes I have for the Lewis, this one right here is probably my favorite to use. This is with the infantry division, and the key behind the infantry division here is partially for the extra attachment, but mainly to help me strafe faster in a gunfight, because that's one of the big downsides with the Lewis, or with any LMG for that matter. So I love using infantry with this. We've got quick draw, FMJ, and extended mags. This allows me to spray through cover like crazy. Like I said, don't really have to reload very often, if at all, with that extended mag attachment on there. I've got lookout as my basic training, which allows me to acquire my targets easier at those longer ranges, as well as sometimes be able to see through some smoke grenades, and I can just kind of spray through and get kills that way. This is excellent for defense in war. I've got a machine pistol as a secondary and a sticky grenade as my lethal. Next up, we have an armored class, and I'll be honest, I don't really use the armored division too often, but I did want to give you guys an example using the armored division with this. Once again, we have quick draw and FMJ, but this time we have a reflex sight on there, and we have 3 attachments. That means we have primed equipped. Now, I know primed recently got nerfed, and it doesn't really help so much with flinch anymore, but this gun really does excel with that 3rd attachment, so it's absolutely worthwhile to use primed on the Lewis in my opinion. And you'll notice we don't have extended mags or hustle on this. This is because we're using the armored division. If you ever need to reload this gun when you have the armored division, deploy your bipod and then reload. You'll reload significantly faster by doing this. Once again, for a secondary, we have machine pistol with extended mags, and for our lethal, we have an S-mine. Now, I don't normally use the bouncing Betty or the S-mine, because normally I'm a more aggressive player, but with the specific setup here, this is designed to kind of deploy your bipod and just lock down a lane, and when you're doing that, sometimes it's nice to know that you have your back covered by one of these S-mines. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's gun guide. I'd like to know in the comment section below, have you guys given the Lewis an honest go yet? If not, definitely do it. But if you have, what do you guys think of this gun? Do you think it's underrated like I do, or did you have a hard time using it? Once again, as well, let me know in the comment section below which one of the guns you'd like me to cover next for this series, keeping in mind I've already covered all of the SMGs and a couple other ones here and there. I will leave a link to the playlist down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.